Hey guys, so I'm back and just want to make another informational video. Deployed overseas right now and pretty bored, so I figured I'd just take this time to try to pass on some tips and tricks that I've learned in my career. A little bit about me. So I went to basic training at Fort Jackson, 2015. Went through officer candidate school at Fort Bragg with the North Carolina National Guard in 2016, graduated 2017, and then I went to Field Artillery BOLC, which is a basic officers leaders course at Fort Sill, and that was about a 5-month long course, which is very difficult. And then I became a FSO, fire support officer. I'm now an FDO / platoon leader. What I wanted to focus on is the BOLC aspect of a field artillery career. So when I went through BOLC, it was kind of a very difficult, challenging time, because field artillery can be very complicated, and when you're going through BOLC, you're kind of covering everything all at once, and it's coming at you real quick. So some of the things that I notice that people struggle with, some things that I struggle with, are definitely things like manual gunnery. So if you're like brand new to field artillery, you have no clue what fire support is, gunnery, anything like that, especially if you're like fresh out of OCS or ROTC. I'm not really sure how much they go in depth with ROTC. It might be more than OCS because we didn't really go over field artillery at all. And none of the prior service guys that were in my OCS class were field artillery, so I kind of went into BOLC not knowing anything. So the first month you're there, you're doing like common core stuff. So you're kind of in processing. You're kind of going over basics of how like combined arms works together. So like the point of field artillery is to support maneuver, and they kind of go through what a brigade consists of, what a field artillery battalion looks like, stuff like that. They're just kind of giving you the basics of how the army is structured and field artillery's place in that. So you get a little bit out of that. You kind of learn that as you go along. But then as you start taking your classes, you're going to be taking your fire support classes and your gunnery classes at the same time. Like on different days, you kind of alternate. So you're learning everything all at once, and it can be overwhelming if you're not like paying attention in class and taking notes. You're really going to struggle doing your homework, because like after you get out of class and you have homework, it can take up a lot of your time. That's why it's important, like especially on the weekends, you want to try to get away from Fort Sill or wherever you're doing your BOLC at. You want to try to get away from posts as much as possible, just to kind of keep your mind fresh, and you don't want to get bogged down. And the way you do that is being able to get your homework done on time and not procrastinating. In order to get your homework done on time, you got to be paying attention in class, taking a lot of good notes, because those notes will save you when you get to your homework. So you start learning like the basics of being a FSO, fire support officer, and then you start learning manual gunnery, which is, I think, one of the most difficult things to learn in field artillery BOLC, because we don't do it anymore. It's kind of rare to find people who actually know how to do it. They've heard of it, they've seen it, but there's not a lot of people who really know how to do it. So it's kind of like a lost art, and it's just very complicated math and trig and all that kind of stuff. So if you can like learn some manual gunnery before you go to BOLC, I would highly suggest that, because I went in not knowing anything about it, and thankfully I actually had one of my classmates who had been in artillery for quite a while. He's a prior service guy. He had done it at his unit, and he knew a lot more than anybody else in my class. So he was able to help me understand how it works. And the key to that is like accuracy, because our goal as artillerymen is to provide accurate and timely fires, right? So when you're doing manual gunnery, it can be very difficult. It's not impossible, so you have to stick with it until it clicks, and then once it clicks, you're good. On the fire sport side, they teach you a lot of like dismounted ops, which is good and bad. Being a fister, I was on a Bradley, and I think we were in a Bradley for all of 5 minutes the entire time we were there. So I'd never learned how to use the FS3, never learned how to use the FOSS, which is the forward observer system in the back of a Bradley. I can maybe try to post a video later on that kind of goes more in depth about how to be like in a B fist, which is like a Bradley fist. So they don't really go into detail of like all that kind of stuff. They teach you like schoolhouse stuff, which is great. It definitely prepared me to do my job as an FSO and an FDO. But like on the fire sports side, most important thing is definitely learning how to like plan targets, because when you actually get attached to a maneuver unit and you're working alongside your maneuver commander, you really have to know his mindset or her mindset, because they're going to execute their mission a specific way to them, and you kind of have to know what they want and what they're looking out for, or how to look out for them, because we support them. I was very fortunate to have a maneuver commander that was just a hard charger. He loved artillery. You're going to run into maneuver commanders who don't really care for artillery that much. They don't really see the value of using us, and they kind of learn the lesson the hard way when you're going through training and they're just getting demolished. And that's really your opportunity as an FSO to step up and say, hey, this is what I can do for you, and get artillery in the fight. As long as you do that and you do your job, your maneuver commander should have no problem. You're going to run into situations where, like, you sell them on it, they're willing to use you, but the rounds just don't drop, because especially for guys who know what centralized and decentralized command is, centralized command just takes all the momentum out of a fire mission, and that's a conversation for another day. Let me get back on track. So in BOLC, it's very important to like start off strong in the beginning, just because a lot of that stuff is like your foundation for the rest of the course. And if you're struggling with stuff, like, you have to ask for help. Your instructors should have like additional instruction on the weekends. Definitely go to those. I went to some in the very beginning when I wasn't getting the curriculum or the material, and it helped me get back on track, and then I kind of stopped going to them because it clicked and I didn't have to go to them. But if you're struggling, definitely go to those extra instructions, and then just ask people for help. Like, nobody wants anybody to fail, and if you do get it, then help other people, because once it clicked for me, I started reaching out and helping a lot of other people. And you'll run into those people later on. I just ran into a guy overseas that I hadn't seen since BOLC, and he was one of my good buddies when we were in school, and it all came from me just offering help, and he took me up on it, and we were good buddies through BOLC, and then I ran into him years later. I'm not really sure what else to go into. You're going to get a lot of just like the basics, and until you actually get to your unit and start doing some actual training, like a real life training. It's just kind of like, that's the difference between schoolhouse and real life. but just try to learn the basics, what they give you, try to practice as much as you can, and like actually try to care about it, because if you just kind of brush it off like, oh well, I'm not going to be FDO, so I'm not really going to pay attention to, you know, the gunnery side. Well, that's not really how it works in your career as an artilleryman. You're going to do both jobs, so it's important to know both sides, because I got switched to be an FDO on deployment, and that was kind of a surprise to me. I didn't bring any of my gunnery stuff. I brought my safety notebook from BOLC, and that was about it, which helped me do the safety exam. That is one last thing that I'll cover. So the safety exam, I know back in the day it used to be like pass or fail. Like if you failed it, you're done, you got kicked out of BOLC. Now I think they have, like, you get 2 chances to do it. And like when I went through in 2017, 2018, they gave you like 4 hours to do the safety exam. At the end of that 4 hours, you turn your test in. If you got an 80 or better, then you passed, like you were good. You still had to sit there and correct your test till you got 100. That way you showed you knew the information. But if you turned it in, you got less than an 80, you had like an additional, I think it was maybe 2 or 3 hours to work up to an 80 and pass the exam. And if you did fail it after all of it, you still got a second chance. But safety is super important, because once you actually go to your unit and you're doing any kind of training involving live rounds, everything has to be done safely, obviously, and they won't let you fire a single round unless you do safety. So try to learn as much about that. I can do another video on that as well, trying to explain safety. That might be beneficial. If you do want to know more about that, just leave a comment or send me a message, and I can try to go more in depth about that. But hope some of the information that I've shared is helpful. I know you can pretty much go online and learn everything, but for me, it's helped me a lot just to like talk to other people, hear their experiences, and then share my experiences as well. That's helped me tenfold in my career. So thanks for watching, and catch you later.